Bobby's Confession by Joe. Bobby has a fetish and wonders if he should tell Hank. Chapter 1. Yup, Hank said, sipping his beer. Yep, Dale said, smoking his cigarette. Boomhauer said, panning the area. Yep, Bill said, scratching his bald head. Nothing special happened in Arlen that Saturday afternoon. The men just stood in front of the fence in their alley, unsuccessfully thinking of things to think about. Finally, after standing silent for over an hour, they gave up trying to think of anything to say, and just decided to return home and resume their personal lives. Hank walked into the living room and sat down on the sofa and watched the news on the television. Nothing new was on TV. It seemed like an absolutely boring day. Just then, Peggy, Hank's wife, entered the living room. "Hank, why are you sitting there? If you're this bored, why don't you go mow the lawn or paint the house?" Peggy asked her husband. "Well, I would, but I did all that 2 days ago. I don't need to do that right now," Hank responded. "You know what? We need to go out to the Megalomart and buy some groceries," Peggy said. "Get Bobby. We're going." Hank then walked into Bobby's bedroom. "Bobby, your mother and I are going to the Megalomart to get some groceries. Want to tag along?" Hank asked. "Sure, Dad," Bobby said excitedly. He grabbed his wallet and followed Hank and Peggy out to the truck. Bobby wanted to go to the store for some time because there was something he wanted very badly. Hank started the truck and drove the family to the Megalomart. Hank and Peggy were standing around in the produce section, but Bobby was bored. He had not come out to the store for this. "Dad," Bobby said, "can I go somewhere else and look around?" "Well, sure, son," Hank smiled, "but be sure to find us when you're done. We'll probably still be here in the produce section." "Okay, Dad, I will," Bobby said, running off. He felt very excited. He had never felt so good in his life. He knew what he was looking for. Bobby bolted around the corners and aisles of the Megalomart and eventually found what he was looking for: the women's clothing section. Bobby looked around to make sure no one was around. To his luck, nobody was. He instantly snatched off a pink tank top and made a mad dash for the dressing room. Bobby took off his dark gray shirt and slipped the tiny little tank top over his husky abdomen. "Heh, I like this shirt," Bobby said in a strange voice. He posed in several different positions, seeing how he would look. On impulse, Bobby slipped the tank top in his pants pocket. He put his old shirt back on and found some pink bikinis. He took one and went back to the dressing room. This time, he shed all his clothes off and put them on and felt kinky. Bobby nearly fainted, but he realized that he needed to go back with his parents. He kept the bikini on, but slipped his pants and shirt over it. He hoped his parents would not find out. Bobby left the women's clothing section feeling very strange. He hurried back into the produce section where he saw Hank and Peggy leaving for one of the cash registers. "Hey, Bobby, you're just in time," Hank started, but frowned when he saw a little lump under Bobby's chest. "Bobby, what's under your chest?" Hank asked. "Oh, I'm wearing an undershirt," Bobby half lied. "Oh, okay, son," Hank said. After paying for the items, the Hills headed to the doors to leave the Megalomart. Just as Bobby was about to walk out the door, loud sirens emitted from all directions. Chapter 2. Two security officers went up to Hank. "Excuse me, sir, but we'll have to ask to see your merchandise," an officer said. "Excuse me, sir, but I can assure you that I have not stolen a god-dang thing. I paid for every item in that shopping cart," Hank said, pointing his finger at the cart. The officers looked over it anyways to make sure everything was paid for. "All the items in your cart are clear," the other officer said, "but I don't know why that alarm went off." "It went off when that fat kid walked through," the first officer said. The Hills and the officers looked at Bobby. "Did you steal anything, son?" "Nuh-uh," Bobby lied. He started sweating. He knew he was in trouble now. "Well, we're going to have to check your person to make sure," the officer said. He took his scanner and scanned Bobby. Instantly the siren emitted. Both officers' eyes widened, but their eyes grew even wider when the scanner went off the second time. "Okay, son, take your shirt off." Bobby was slow and reluctant to do so, especially with Hank and Peggy watching him. "Do you understand me, boy? Take off your shirt." Bobby still didn't move. "Bobby, you heard the officer. Take off your dang shirt. I'll give you a big punishment when we get home," Hank said. Bobby, fearing his father, slowly lifted his shirt, knowing the worst was yet to come. Hank, Peggy, and both of the officers looked shocked when seeing Bobby in the dainty bikini top. "Bobby!" Hank cried. "What the hell is your problem?" "Take your pants off, son," the first officer said. Bobby took his pants off slowly, revealing the frilly bikini bottom. Whoa! Hank yelled. And look at this, the other officer said, pulling the pink tank top out of Bobby's pants. Looks like we have a transvestite. Again, Hank yelled, whoa! Chapter 3. Later that night, Hank gave Bobby a stern talking to in his room. Bobby, you're gonna explain yourself right now, ordered Hank. I can't believe you were wearing a bikini. Not only that, but you were stealing. I'm ashamed of you. Well, Dad, Bobby started, looking around his room. I've got something to tell you. I'm listening, Hank said, giving Bobby a hard stare. Bobby was stuck, though. He couldn't just flat out tell Hank he was a transvestite. Hank would be ashamed of him and probably give him the biggest lecture he'd ever heard. Bobby knew it was wrong, but he just couldn't help himself. He was just so attracted to frilly garments. Nothing, Dad. Never mind, Bobby sighed. I'll just take any punishment you throw at me. Well, good. I'm glad that's settled, Hank said. Tomorrow, you are going to weed out the backyard, and then you're going to do some maintenance up in the attic. Bobby couldn't sleep at all that night. He tossed and turned, still thinking about how great he felt in that bikini. He was determined to do it again, but if he did, Hank would never let him hear the end of it. The next morning, the Hills went to Arlen First Methodist Church, as they did every Sunday. Bobby sat through Reverend Stroop's long lecture and hoped that it went on for a long time so that he could avoid his punishment. Hank, however, wished Reverend Stroop would hurry up because he couldn't wait to punish Bobby. When the Hills returned home, Hank put Bobby to work as he promised. First, Bobby pulled weeds out of the backyard, while Hank stood behind him, watching him work. Bobby grumbled as he did so. He had better things to do with his time than slave for Hank. He couldn't help himself. He was wild about girls' clothes, and it was just part of his personality. He wanted to get the work over with so he could see about satisfying his fetish. After Bobby was finished weeding the backyard, Hank and he went up into the attic to fix it up. Hank moved everything downstairs so that they could work. Hank and Bobby were nailing plywood to the floor to make a walkable floor. They also started working on partition. Bobby was curious about the attic work. Dad, what's all this for? Well, son, Hank answered, sounding calm for the first time in a while. Peggy and I have been thinking that someday we might adopt a child. And we just want to fix this room up for that child. When's that going to be? Bobby asked. Who knows, Bobby? It could be tomorrow or 100 years from now. We're not really sure, but we're still thinking about it. Bobby didn't really care about Hank and Peggy's future plans. He just wanted to get his work done. After he was finished constructing the partition in the attic, Hank let him go. Go straight to your room, mister, Hank said, sounding strict again. Bobby obeyed and went downstairs. He shut the door to his room and locked it. Chapter 4. That Sunday night, Bobby creaked his door open to see if Hank and Peggy had gone to bed. He saw that the lights were out, so they apparently had gone to bed. Bobby then opened the window to his room and silently left. He went into the garage and got his bicycle. He got on and started hurrying when all of a sudden he spotted Dale, giving him a hard stare through his glasses. Dale stood at the end of the driveway. Bobby, just where do you think you're going? The store, Bobby said. Why? Dad wanted me to get groceries at 10 o'clock at night. Wait a minute, Mr. Gribble, what are you doing up at this time of night? Keeping an eye on the neighborhood. I'm the neighborhood watchdog. I make sure nothing weird goes on around here. Now get your sorry ass back inside, or I'm telling Hank. Bobby got off his bike and gripped Dale's neck in a certain place, which caused him to become unconscious. Dale fell to the ground, and Bobby got back on his bike to leave for the Megalomart. When he got there, he immediately went to the women's clothing section. Practically nobody was in the store. The section was all his. Finally, Bobby nearly exclaimed. He tore his clothes off and started to freely try on women's clothing. He loved the sensation of it. He tried on skirts, pantyhose, bras, spaghetti strap shirts, lingerie, panties, and high heel shoes. He left a bunch of clothing laying on the women's clothing section. Bobby was dressed in a tutu when he suddenly heard someone yell, "Hey!" Bobby shot back and saw that there was an angry security guard. Bobby gasped and ran out of the Megalomart. He got on his bike and left for safety. Bobby didn't know where he could hide, though he just decided to go to Bill's house. Bobby then heard sirens behind him, and he looked back, seeing a police car chase him. It's funny because there's actually police sirens going on right now. When Bobby arrived at Bill's house, he dropped his bike and burst through the door of Bill's house. Meanwhile, Bill was in his bedroom, cuddling with a pillow he pretended was his ex-wife Lenore. "Oh, Lenore, it's so good to have you back," Bill said, nearly squeezing the pillow, but he stopped when he heard Bobby run aside, along with the heavy footsteps and shouting of policemen. Bill entered his living room to see what was going on. Bobby was hiding behind an easy chair. "Come out with your hands up," ordered the policeman. Bobby slowly came from behind the chair and raised his hands. Bill turned to one of the police officers. "What's going on?" Bill asked, worried. "This kid was trying on women's clothing at Megalomart in public, made a mess, and left without paying for his tutu," the officer explained. "Bobby!" gasped Bill. Just then, Dale burst inside. He had woken up from being unconscious. "Aha! I knew something fishy was going on. I'm telling Hank." Bobby left to get Hank. Bobby gasped and nearly started to cry. The policeman asked Bobby for his information and asked Bobby for his side of the story. Afterward, Bobby remained silent while the police recorded the information. It wasn't long after when Dale returned with Hank. "Bobby Hill, explain yourself!" Hank demanded. "What has gotten into you? You're wearing girls' clothes again. Apparently doing that work didn't get through to you. Maybe a few hours doing community service will set you straight," Hank said. "But first, I must give you a firm talking to." Chapter 5. Hank looked at Bobby angrily, waiting for Bobby's response. Bobby knew this was the big moment. Everyone was watching him. He knew it would humiliate him, but he had to say it in order to get it off his chest. "Dad, I'm a transvestite," Bobby confessed, bowing his head. "What?" Hank nearly exploded. "Dad, I'm sorry. It's just the way I am. I like wearing women's clothing. It just turns me on. If you can't accept me for who I am, then I shouldn't be your son," Bobby said. "But Bobby," Hank started, but then looked around him. Everyone was nodding their heads at him. Hank sighed. "All right, fine. Bobby, if that's how you feel, I guess I have no choice but to accept it." Hank wanted to go home and wash his mouth out with soap. "Thanks, Dad," Bobby said, and hugged Hank. "I love you." "I'll love you too, son, and I'll always be proud of you, no matter who you are. But don't think I'm happy about your decision, though," Hank said. For the next week, Bobby was sentenced to a week of community service. He had to pick up trash along the freeways and then clean up graffiti on city buildings. He was glad that he revealed his secret to Hank. He couldn't have gone on any longer without telling. It would have gotten him into even more trouble. The end.
Why are you always trying to turn me into you? Why can't you accept me for who I am?